Hello, my name is Adriana,
And I'm Joe.
and welcome to this first edition of Popcorn Diaries, where we will be discussing movies and all that pertains to them, from story to special effects and all the in betweens. Since it happens to be October, we will start with the horror genre. And you cannot talk about horror without talking about The Exorcist, written by William Peter Blatty and directed by William Friedkin. It was first released in 1973, and 40 years later, it still tops many of the lists for the horror movie of all time. So let's get into this discussion, Joe. You said that you had not seen this in 40 years. What did
Well,
you
I
think?
originally saw The Exorcist at the movie theater when it came out in '73, and I have not seen it since. And that I refused to watch it on TV because it would just be chopped up, if you will. So I had the opportunity here in the last few days to watch the director's cut, which has a few extra minutes thrown in there. So it was quite refreshing to see it after 40 years.
Did you have any thoughts on the differences of having watched it earlier in the theaters versus watching it at home? Was there any difference in the experience?
Well, when I saw it in the theater, I was much younger, obviously, and I went with a group of kids. So probably didn't take it as serious as it was probably meant to be back then. But watching it this time around, I watched it for what it really was, and I actually enjoyed it much, much more than I remember back when I was just a teenager.
Well, I've watched the movie a few times, quite a few times actually. I do tend to like this movie a lot. And, every time I watch it, I watch and see something new, and it still scares me. It's probably one of the only horror movies that still scares me after each time I see it. So let's talk a little bit about the story. So this story, the premise is really of a young girl who gets possessed by a demon. What do you think? Was the story believable? Did it make you believe it?
Oh, definitely. I think what makes this story so effective is, you have this sweet little 13-year-old girl who, as the movie progresses, just turns more and more evil, if you will. But I think the thing that scares myself the most, and I hopefully everyone else out there is, this is real. This has been documented. People have been possessed and have done very, very strange things. And to watch this young girl go through this transition as the movie progresses, if that doesn't put you on the edge of your seat, I don't think too much will.
True, true indeed. There have been many, many sequels to The Exorcist. None, I think, stand up as well as the original. You just had some really great actors in this first original movie. Um, let's talk a little bit about the special effects of the time. So this movie was produced back in the 70s, early 70s at that, where you didn't have all the, computer generated graphics. Everything was pretty much done with wires. It was pretty much done realistically with makeup, special effect makeup. What did you think about all the things that they used in the movie, like the famous vomiting scene and Reagan's makeup? She had a ton of makeup work done every day for the last few scenes where she keeps getting worse and worse, and you see the changes in her faces.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of movies back then that did the real deal. The stunts were real. There's no CGI, so everything you're watching. They physically had to do when they made this movie, and I think that adds another level to the experience of watching this. From her face deteriorating as the movie goes on with the scars and the blood, the bed shaking. Of course, she levitates at one point. The famous pea soup scene where she vomits that up. I mean, that all really happened. I mean, when you saw that pea soup go across the room and hit the father, yeah, he got hit. That was the real deal. It wasn't a bunch of CGI. So it's very cool.
Actually, speaking of that pea soup, it's actually kind of a trivia that they weren't aiming for his face. They were actually aiming for his chest. So they got him in the face on accident, and he was really, really disgusted. So that actual reaction of his to being, sped up on with that vomit was actually a real reaction. And there's some other several stories that go around about the director, and the lengths he went to get, their reactions. The harnesses pulled and yanked them, to the extent that several of the actors had back injuries.
Yep, that's true. Not only the back injuries, but if you remember, as the movie progresses, Reagan's room gets colder and colder, and you start to see everybody's breath. I mean, that was the real deal.
Yes.
From my understanding, they took several air conditioners and just flooded the room for hours and got the temperature literally down to 30 degrees. So when you see her, because she was just like in a nightgown laying there in the bed, I mean, she was cold. I mean, she was definitely cold. That's definitely their breath you see. And they said that, behind the scenes, that the stage crew and I'm sorry, not the stage crew, but the filming crew and that type of thing, they were all very cold too. I mean, at one point they said the room even snowed a little bit.
Correct.
Because of condensation in the room. So that's pretty cool. And one other bit of trivia that I remember reading is Linda Blair, who played Reagan, to this day does not like cold anything. So that had affected her enough that, she's not comfortable in cold climates or anything.
Makes you wonder if she developed a little bit of hypothermia and nobody ever talked about it after that.
Yeah, that's possible.
And speaking of like all the things that went on in this movie, you hear so much after the facts, and then, they released it not too long ago in theaters when they had, an anniversary edition. I didn't get a chance to go see it. I wish I had. But some of the things that you hear is that the producers actually thought this movie was not going to make it. And it happens to be one of the highest grossing horror movies of all time.
Yeah, it's hard to believe you think this wouldn't be a hit back in the day. Again, just watching it here a few days ago, yeah, it may start off a little slow by today's tastes, but I think it's, really well paced. It gets very on again, off again as the movie progresses. Things are quiet, they're discussing what to do. Then all of a sudden they jump right into a scene where she's going crazy in the room. So I mean, the shock value is there from just the way it, switches on and switches off dramatically. And then, of course, the vulgarity that comes out of Reagan's mouth in just about every scene. If that doesn't set you back in your chair a little bit, nothing will.
True enough. Just to see a little girl speaking in such a way that you just are astounded. I mean, nowadays people are very desensitized. We see so many things on TV. We're constantly bombarded with, action movies, horror movies, and everything. But to this day, I think this movie has held up very well. It stands up next to most of the horror movies today,
Agreed.
including movies that have, astounding special effects.
Yep.
This movie just blows them out of the water because the acting was, so well done. The story was well written. And having the novelist actually write the screenplay, I think, played in well to that.
Yeah, it definitely made a difference, no doubt.
So, in the coming weeks, we're going to be talking about new movies all the time. We do have a lot of things coming forward in the future, and Joe and I will be discussing a lot about different movies. So Joe's going to take us out today.
All right, folks, thanks for joining us here for this edition of the Popcorn Diaries. Feel free to continue the discussion with the comments below. The next movie we'll be discussing is Cabin in the Woods. Haven't seen it, don't know anything about it, so I'm looking forward to seeing that, and we'll be focusing on the special effects on that movie. If you have any suggestions for movies you'd like us to discuss in the future, just leave a comment below. Until next time, I'm Joe.
And I'm Adriana, and this was Popcorn Diaries.